Tonight's episode of ABCA At Home Perspectives is made possible by Pocket Radar. Pocket Radar's smart coach app system, with its unique ability to automatically capture videos with embedded velocities, allows coaches to stay connected and work remotely with current players and new recruits. Their Bring Your Training Home initiative will provide education and resources, including webinars and a limited time discount to help players remotely train, develop, and be seen at home with video analysis tools. Check out their 2020 Expo Theater presentation located in the ABCA Video Library.
One focus, one cue that forces you to simplify.
Toughness is a muscle. It's not a gene. You're not born with toughness.
Can I tell you the number one problem coaching anybody today? Everybody's offended.
You're the example for them. Look yourself in the mirror and go, am I giving these kids enough?
The only thing worse than being blind is having sight without vision.
When people start celebrating small things that occur on the field, the next thing you know, you get this small amount of energy, and then it just builds up. And the next thing you know, the environment, the energy in the environment that is created is very positive, and it's contagious, and it's very enthusiastic. And really, as a coach, that's what you want.
Welcome to the American Baseball Coaches Association's At Home Perspectives. The ABCA will be organizing and streaming live virtual coaching clinics featuring a different panel discussing a different element of the game every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. These clinics will be archived and available to watch on demand within the My ABCA mobile app and the Coaching Resource Library section of our website. Interact with us on Twitter. Send your questions to @ABCA1945 with the hashtag ABCAAtHome. Don't forget to include your name and rep your program. Since 1945, the ABCA has been bringing great coaching minds together to educate, mentor, guide, and support the greatest game in the world. Tonight is no exception, so grab your notebook and prepare to lock in for the next 90 minutes. We have a great conversation in store for you. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jim Richardson, and this is ABCA at Home. Preparing for tonight's conversation has forced me to come to terms with my own race-related blind spot. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I'm uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. But I think that's the whole point of tonight's conversation. If we truly want to see a change within our sport, our communities, and our society, we all must be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable. We're not pretending that one conversation is going to put an end to the systemic racism within our game, but it is a start. And your willingness to listen, to learn, empathize, and ultimately advocate for diversity and inclusion within your programs is a step towards the solution. To quote the late Nelson Mandela, sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. Sport can awaken hope where there was previously only despair. Sport speaks to people in a language they can understand. Joining us this evening, we have Dr. Scott Brooks, Associate Professor and Associate Director of the Global Sports Institute at Arizona State University. Dana Brown, the Vice President of Scouting for the Atlanta Braves. Kevin Coe, the Assistant General Manager of the Pullman Community Center in Chicago. Tim Corbin, the head baseball coach at Vanderbilt University. Trey Harris, a prospect in the Braves organization, and most recently, the 2019 Atlanta Braves Minor League Player of the Year. And finally, our guest moderator for this evening, Kerrick Jackson. Kerrick is the head baseball coach at Southern University and the current ABCA Diversity in Baseball Committee chair. Gentlemen, on behalf of the ABCA, thank you for being here, spending the time, and sharing your perspective. Coach Jackson, the floor is yours.
Thanks, JR. Again, appreciate you guys giving us this opportunity to have this discussion, to have this town hall. I think one of the things you said from the beginning, and I've said this over the last few weeks and having different conversations on this topic, is as baseball coaches and as coaches in general, we constantly talk to our players and challenge our players to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so I think it's only fair that if we ask our players to do that, then we also need to be able to have that same practice, which is going to allow us to have these types of conversations. Tonight, what I plan for is a basic roundtable, sit around, very honest, open, direct conversations about some different topics. I'll preface it by saying I don't want anybody to get their feelings hurt. What we're saying and the discussions that we're going to have are all meant to open this up and to create some better understanding from both sides, and specifically as it pertains to the game. We know all the things that are going on in our society right now, and so we wanted to have this discussion with relevance to the game. And so we got this great panel tonight of guys that have a lot of different experiences and will bring a lot of knowledge. And I've been pretty excited about this thing since we started planning it about 4 weeks ago. So to get it started off, and I'll direct this, our first topic is let's discuss the state of the game with regards to diversity, specifically as it relates to Black players and coaches. And I'll let Dana, I'll let you start that off.
Yeah, so if I could set the table for us tonight, I'd like to talk about 3 specific words in relation to where we are today, right? I would say opportunity would be one of them. I would say oppression would be another one. And I would say openness would be the third one. As it relates to, opportunity in this game, I've been in the front office for 18 years because of a vision set forth by Bud Selig back in 2002. So Bud had the vision of giving more minorities a chance in the game, particularly in the front office. So Bud hired Omar to take over the Montreal Expos at the time that became the Nationals. Omar Minaya hired me as a scouting director for the Expos. And at the end of the day, Bud created, with his vision, an opportunity for me to be in the front office. This front office, at the end of the day, extended 18 years. And I would say that I got an 18-year run, because, Omar gave me the opportunity. I was fortunate enough at the time to hire Alex Anthopoulos. Alex and I have taught each other a lot about the game. So the good Lord says iron sharpens iron. So we were able to, do some things in that respect. And Kerrick, I was able to, give you an opportunity through a diversity program that was actually started in Atlanta by Stan Kasten, and he brought it to Washington. So I was able to give you an opportunity. When we brought that program, you came in, we hired you and Dan Nellum. Both you guys are still heavily involved in baseball. And so it created this opportunity. And so that's the first word, opportunity. Now I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit. So as it relates to the word oppression, so we have a long history of fighting different systematic racist things, not only in society, but also in sports. And what has brought us to this point, what's waking us up, is the death of George Floyd. Now we have people with aggressive listening, and we're trying to figure out, hey, what's going on in society? And then we come to the issue of this big wealth gap, that we face as African Americans because we're not getting certain jobs and just throughout history. And, you know, if you look at the piece, I studied this piece this week on Nicole Hannah-Jones, and she talked about this wealth gap. And, you know, it's striking because at the end of the day, as an African-American growing up in this country, my mom was born in 1935. I was the first one of 12 kids to get a college degree. And so that put us in a different position, but I was able to get it because of baseball, because I had a coach like Mike Shepard and Ed Blankmeyer who did something with Tim Corbin is doing. He gives opportunities to African-American players. He brings them in, scholarships, whatever the case may be. And so you're able to close this whole wealth gap by creating these opportunities, you know, and there were some big wealth gaps in terms of land. African-American couldn't own land. We couldn't get loans, you know, the Social Security divide. So there's just so many things that just take place. And then it comes to this final thing, and then I'll turn it over. It's just openness. So you have the word opportunity, you have the word oppression, now you have openness. Now we all come to the table. We can talk about things we can do. We can be open about this. You know, right now it's a time where we have the ears of America, and particularly white America. And at the end of the day, you know, white America has played a big part in a lot of the progression of Blacks, whether it's in the civil rights movement or different things like that. We need white America to come alongside us and to help us create some of these opportunities. And now we're in a position where they're listening. We're going to try to bring some resolve so that we can build up this opportunity to create some jobs and different things for African Americans. And that's what I would do in terms of setting the table to say, hey guys, let's come together, let's have a discussion, and let's get it right.
Good. Coach Corbin, your feelings on the state of the game with diversity as it pertains to Black coaches and players.
Well, I mean, at the college level, there is not much. I mean, that's the truth. That's what it is. There's few opportunities in the college game for a lot of different reasons. I would say number one, economic, the ability to get a baseball scholarship to play baseball at a Division I school. Those opportunities are minimal for everyone, let alone an African-American kid who wants to play baseball. I see it, you know, more, and I know we'll get into more discussion about it, but certainly at the foundational level, the inability to create pathways for a young kid to look at baseball at a young age and look at it as a way to move forward in their career in athletics as an opportunity to use their skill set to get an education. And those opportunities are few and far between. And I think an economic level, number one, as a young kid, to be able to play the game, to be able to get to a field, be able to get the equipment, to be able to get on a team. And I think all of those things added up, there's a certain comfort level. And if there's not a comfort level to play the sport, they start moving away from the sport. And things that we've spoken about here before is the representation of the African-American coach, so that when a young kid looks at the sport itself and says, yeah, I want to play because there's someone like me that coaches it, and there's someone like me that teaches it. So I do think there's certainly a comfort level. And then, you know, from a marketing standpoint, and I'm not involved in Major League Baseball, but I do know that Major League Baseball is the third wheel when it comes to the NBA and the NFL. And when you start talking about and thinking about marketing our players in the game at the highest level, whether it's a Timmy Anderson or whether it's a Mookie Betts or whether it's a George Springer or eventually it's a Trey, you know, I'm not so sure that a lot of young kids, inner city kids, really know who those players are, but they know who Amani Bates is, and Amani Bates is just a junior in high school, and he's going to be a heck of a basketball player. But I just think the marketability of our game at the lower level, so a young kid can say, yes, that is a sport I want to play, and it's a pathway to getting an education. I do believe those things in for sure.
Perfect. Kevin.
Well, in Chicago, we have a lack of resources. Obviously, we have a lack of facilities. We have a lack of. I work at a community center, and I had someone come in the other day, and they were coming in for basketball, but they told me that baseball was a middle class sport, which was interesting. Which is an interesting comment to me. I never heard it because I played it. I grew up. We're in a low socioeconomic area of the city, but we're trying to grow the sport, and I think. The kids that are playing, it's a small community. It's not as big as it was when I was playing baseball, but there are kids that are playing and they want to get to college and play baseball. They look up to like kids from our community, like a Ro Coleman that started Vanderbilt, and Corey Ray, who was drafted in the first round, or Ed Howard, who was recently drafted in the first round by the Chicago Cubs, because they're tangible and that's who they know. While I grew up watching guys like Andre Dawson and Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden, those guys were in the big leagues, and I idolized them. I ran home from school every day so I could watch the Cubs play and watch Andre Dawson win a World Series. And so what we want to do is allow the opportunity for kids in our community of our color, the same opportunities that are afforded kids that are not from the same type of communities. One of the reasons why they started the ACE program was because there was a kid who had a ton of talent. He was a 4-tool player, and he wasn't rated. Nobody even knew who he was. And I have to give credit to the White Sox for starting that program because it started a path that no one knew existed, to have Vanderbilt and Louisville and all the other Power 5 schools come into the Chicagoland area and recruit kids. That it didn't happen. 20 years ago, there were no Power 5 schools. There weren't even any 4-year schools coming in. Most of the kids either had to go play in the SWAC or they had to go to junior college, and that's all we knew. And so now with the momentum that's been built by the organizations in the community, and so all of you guys know Lou Carey. Lou Carey spent a lot of time building a program here and helped tons of kids get to college. He left behind a Jeff Lattimore. He left behind a Mike Davis. I've recently started a new program here, and it's just an opportunity. We like it's been said, we just want a fair opportunity for our kids to have a chance to go to college and play baseball, because a lot of kids don't. If they don't have anything to attach themselves to, then there's a lot of distractions here in Chicago, and everybody's pretty fully aware of the crime that happens in Chicago. And what we try to do is keep the kids occupied so they're not in the line of fire. And so we want a fair opportunity for our kids to go to the same schools as everyone else around the country.
Perfect. Trey.
First and foremost, I would say that it is 100% turned into a middle-class sport. Going and coaching travel ball this week has really opened my eyes. I coached 7 games this week, and I saw one black baseball player playing against me or with the team that I'm coaching. And it is showing me these parents can't afford for them to pay $350 for a tournament. Every tournament they pay $350. And they play 7 or 8 tournaments. And then they also have to pay for hotel, flights, or driving. So, if you think of the inner city home where they just simply, parents are working night and day to provide food and things like that and housing, where's the extra funding to be able to afford to do these travel teams? And the way we've geared baseball, that's the only way people are getting seen nowadays. The college coaches are only going to perfect game events. There's no one there. To me, honestly, there's not any more of that. If you're good, they'll come find you. It's not like that anymore. And that's where we're missing the boat, in my opinion, on baseball players, and especially our black baseball players, is that we're not willing to take the extra step to go to the inner city and watch this kid play. Everyone wants to go to perfect game, and they want to sit at Field 1 at East Cobb and watch every single game there instead of actually going out there and traveling and figuring out where the best players are. Coach Jack, all the credit for that, because TJ Sycamore ended up being a first rounder, and he was in Iowa not playing travel ball, and you went out of your way to go find that guy, and he ended up being a first rounder and a 3-year guy for us at Missouri. So coaches have to be willing to get out of their own comfort zone. get out of their own normalcy to find those 1 or 2 players that could actually change your program around. I just think that as baseball, we have to be better in incorporating our athletes. Like, we have so many athletes that we're missing out on. I'm not the best player I ever played with, but yet I'm the one who make it because I have 2 parents that loved me and were able to pay for lessons. I had 2 parents that were involved in everything that I had to do and were able to help me in my recruiting process. That's not affordable to everyone. Not everyone has 2 parents who are affluent financially that allow me to do what I want to do. So I just think that we're Xing out just straight off rip. We're Xing out a player strictly for finances. We're not even talking about ability, character, anything else. We're strictly talking money, and we're already losing out on 75% of the kids.
Agreed. Dr. Brooks, so for you, I would ask you to comment on the research study that you did. Was it back in 2011?
No, it was back in 2013.
13, okay. So comment on that study with regards to what you did for Major League Baseball and some of the things that you found at that time.
All right. And if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little bit of the question you've been asking.
For sure.
So I think that to put this in a context, when we're looking at sport, you got to talk about it as an industry, right? So I think of sport as being a sports industrial complex. You've heard that before when you're talking about the prison industrial complex. I'm not talking about incarcerating baseball players. What I'm talking about is the overlap and how there's an embeddedness from top down, from professional ranks all the way down to the youth level. All right. So when you think about that, Bill Rhoden, wonderful New York Times columnist, talks about this conveyor belt when he's looking at sports. Think of how young people are moving through the ranks, how they grow up. Maybe they start with T-ball, then they go into Little League, Pee Wee League, high school, college. They're going through this, and it's a conveyor belt. I'm going to follow this conveyor belt analogy. In our country, we were built, part of our Midwest roots were built on the car industry. And right after post-war, right, World War II, we saw the car industry shift. There was automation, and we talk about this, jobs left. Where do these jobs go? So yes, there's an automation, there's literally the conveyor belt, but we know how many jobs have been outsourced to other countries, right? I'm not blaming the other countries. I'm talking about the folks who made the decisions to move the jobs out, which what they did, you look at it, Detroit has been depleted. Detroit has been really spiraling down ever since then. And there's other cities and towns in the Midwest. Well, what baseball did was something that was similar. So you had Negro leagues, you had a vibrant league. We know the stories of how the Negro League wanted to be kept, right? Aruk Foster wanted to keep the Negro League separate. He knew that the downfall of the Negro Leagues would be an incorporation or just taking players piecemeal. Because what that would do is it would leave the Negro Leagues as a separate and not as good league. And eventually, if you're just taking the top talent, the Negro League falls away. And what do you have in terms of a pipeline? He already understood that. So here's what's happened. We had a time period in baseball where baseball shifted, moved to outsourcing, going and building academies in the Dominican Republic. That changes your whole pool of athletes. And there's a trickle down from there. It leaves baseball, particularly in the inner cities, which is where, as Kevin talked about, you had all these players that we can think of, those in our generation. I grew up in Oakland in the Bay Area. I grew up idolizing a Dave Stewart, seeing a Ricky Henderson. These were guys from my community. There's the generation right above that, the Dusty Bakers, right? The Bobby Bonds. You have these guys who are all inner city guys. When you move this and you start to outsource and go and build these academies, can now shift your resources and your development to another place where there's cheaper talent, a secondary market where you're drafting. And so what happens? These resources that are in the inner city, this pipeline slowly at first starts to decline, starts to dissipate. And now we've seen that whole inner city market just be gone, right? Kevin is really one of the unique, he has a unique opportunity in an inner city to build something special. He's already done it once with the Aces. He's building it again. He has been able to get to these places of resources. So when I work with Major League Baseball, since 2013, Commissioner Bud Selig starts a diversity task force. I had the pleasure and the opportunity to work with Ken Shropshire, who's the CEO of the Global Sport Institute. And we looked at the profile of the Black American player. And in doing so, what we tried to identify is how the current players at that time became baseball players, right? Because so the things that Kevin is talking about, you're competing with all these other sports in the inner city. But that's, again, because the pipeline, the resources, and everything are not there anymore. So in this task force, when I look to see, well, where are these players coming from? As somebody who generally focuses on basketball, I thought that I would see an inner city story. That's not what I found, right? So I looked, and baseball players, whether they're Black, whether they're white, whether they're Latino, all American based, whether they're, if they're American, are coming from the same states: California, Texas, Florida. Now there's a little bit of a change. Black players also come from Georgia, right? So you get a little bit of a shift, but I wondered, wow, okay, they're all coming from the same states. That's definitely not what I would find in basketball. Basketball, I'm going to see huge inner city presence. It's not even what I'm going to find in football. I'm going to find a lot of Texas and California, Florida, but you're going to see them spread out. So why isn't there a spread? That raised the question that I then went and in the task force was able to speak with folks, and they talked about the decline in resources, particularly as it pertained to scouting. So now we get back to the original, right? So to the original story. You got to follow where the resources and money went. When the budget was squeezed, the first scouts to be eliminated were Black scouts. So now you don't have an inner city connection. So the scouts are going to the same schools. When I dug underneath where these players are from, they're from the same parts, the same cities, the same parts of the country, literally, as the white American players. So the scouts are going all to the same places. This is what Trey was saying. We're only going to a few places. And baseball did some things where they tried to be like basketball, right? Basketball has this wonderful AAU, which is really a response to coaches who used to go into the inner city in the hoods, could go into to Philadelphia, Chicago, DC. When you move to AAU tournaments in Vegas, now you got it. It's nice and easy. I can go play golf. I can go gamble and hang out. I don't have to go to the hood. Well, when baseball did that, there was a huge disruption. There was a huge loss. And you've got all this going on when you look at the loss of generations, while in the NBA, you've got the huge increase of Black cool that's going on in the NBA. Starting, you get to the Dr. J's, then you go to the next era with Magic, and that overlaps. Then you get into the like Mike era with Michael Jordan. All the NBA took full advantage of this marketing opportunity and has bridged it, and baseball has not. They're trying to catch up in some small ways, but they lost that opportunity. So the pipeline has really struggled, but it wasn't simply that it just happened, right? It is the product of decisions, and they weren't based on money. You can get more for your dollar if you outsource. So that is a part of what has happened in laying out these connections. Now, when I look at my study, as I said, I looked and said, well, what does it take to become a major leaguer if you're Black? One of the patterns, and this is where Black players stand out, is Black players had to have a connection to baseball through their family. So when we looked at their mothers, you had more mothers who were softball players, at least based on the publicly available data we could gather, than what we found for white players and for Latino American players. You had that they had stories of grandfathers, great uncles, somebody connected to the Negro League. So baseball was in their blood, whether it's on their mother's side or on their father's side. That when you talk about baseball and the amount of repetition, right? All of you coaches can talk about the amount of repetition. How many cuts
are you making? How many balls are you throwing? How many ground balls are you fielding? You have to have this kind of a connection. More black players are related to a major leaguer, often by their fathers. Again, there has to be this close baseball connection, because once you get into that peer level and you got the Michael Jordans that are out there, literally, when I interviewed current baseball players at the time and I asked them who was their athlete idol, more of them said Michael Jordan than any other athlete. And yet they became baseball players, right? So that tells you about the competition. They talked about, hey, our video games ain't even cool. I'd rather play Madden. I'd rather play 2K. Baseball has lost like all of this that it used to have. Baseball, when we were growing up, right? I'm in my late 40s. I idolized how Ricky Henderson held his bat and sat low in his stance. There was something still cool about baseball, but it's lost that. It's had a fight, right? So you have black baseball players had to come a particular route. They often talked about if they weren't the son of a major leaguer, they had to get to a white team because there wasn't enough quality black baseball being played. Again, when you lose the Negro League, when you lose that kind of continuity, you're going to have to find a way to substitute it. And then you got that these young kids will face the steering, right? The stacking in particular positions. I want to be a catcher. How many catchers? The last black American catcher was Charles Johnson. You can't be a catcher, right? So what are the jobs that you can do? What are the roles you can play? You're limited. So black kids started to have these experiences. There already aren't that many opportunities. And you look at the cost. A bat can cost, I hear, $500, $300 to $500. You're paying for a glove that may be $100 to $200. You're paying for more than one bat, right? It all kind of depends on the league you're playing in. You've got to pay for all of this equipment. Basketball is heavily subsidized by sneaker companies, and you don't need anything but a ball. It's heavily subsidized. Football is less subsidized, but it's still how this industry has worked. So you can follow the dollars and look how the dollars left to support, they stopped supporting black baseball. We stopped having scouts. You lost this kind of continuous thread between those old heads who were black coaches and could help you get somewhere. And this thing is just kind of falling out. So we are now at the point that there would have to be drastic measures. You'd have to really enact some hardcore policies where you're looking at, if you're a coach or an athletic director, we've got to go build the pipeline at these high schools. We've got to make sure if we're Major League Baseball, we're doing more than the RBI program. It needs more funding, needs more support. And then you have pro guys. And this was what was crazy to me, who will tell you, I was an all-star and in 3 years I'm out of the league. Their actual experience in baseball, where they feel like either I'm a superstar or I'm cut. I can't become a utility player. They get moved around more than any other players. They do make it to the major leagues in shorter time, but they get moved around to more teams. They get switched in their positions later in their career as a signal that they're going to get moved out. And a number of these guys said there was more that I could have given the game and that I could have gotten out of the game.
Oh, that's good. And that was at that time when you and I met and when you were in the midst of doing that study. And that's one of the things for me too, where when I look at it and look at where things are, I think I've had a pretty unique experience as an individual in that I played at an HBCU and I also played at a PWI and graduated from Nebraska. I coached at Missouri and I've also now coached at an HBCU. So being able to see it from all those facets and understanding the different views from each one of those spots. And it's tough because when you've been in those different arenas, at its essence, you still see the game as the game. Mm-hmm. And then it's not until you get involved in that environment that you realize, oh, wait a minute, my experience here as a coach at Southern University is completely different in all respects than what it was when I was an assistant coach at the University of Missouri. And it's not just budget, right? Obviously that has a lot to do with it, but it's not just that. It's it is the players that we were getting and the kids and more athletes and coaching and developing and those types of things. So I think all you guys brought up some really, really good points talking about that. And one of the questions that I had was why the lack of Black representation, but I think everybody kind of covered that. And so going back to one of the things that you said, Coach Corbin, and this would be a question that I'd ask you guys to comment on is chicken or the egg? Do we need more coaches of color that will equal more players, or do we need more players that will equal more coaches? And Coach Corbin, I'll let you start with that.
Well, I'm going to point to the coaches. Again, I think when you start to do something as a child, it's because you're pulled emotionally towards something that you see, at least from a sports standpoint. And I think a lot of young kids, when they look at our sport in particular, as I said earlier, they don't see a lot of people like them. So when I look at the college game, and we've talked about the fourth coach of opening up an opportunity, a fourth paid coach, which I do feel like that person is needed, where they can develop their teaching and evaluation skills, but it's an open pathway for another position to hire someone else that you can develop. And we've talked about that, Kerrick. The other thing that I think is important, and at least from an older guy who got into the college game, I got in the game because of a graduate assistantship, and graduate assistantships are no longer. But what I see in a graduate assistantship is the ability to formulate 2 or 3 unpaid positions. But the reality is you create educational pathways and programs for young minority coaches to coach and earn their master's degree. But it also, what allows them to do is get on the field and teach. And as they get on the field and teach, and as they grow, and as they get a master's degree, it allows them an opportunity to start surging and moving in an area of coaching. And I think at all levels, particularly in college level, but even in the professional game too, we have to be able to open up pathways where a young man can look at that and say, yes, that's an opportunity for me to get inside the game, rather than just leave a graduate assistantship to an undergraduate coach. At Vanderbilt, we don't have those opportunities, but I do think that every school would have opportunities to give kids the option to teach and coach and continue their education.
So, and going on that, when did that switch take place of losing those GAs? Because obviously I know I look at football, and football has 1,000 GAs. And in many instances, just being real, most of those guys aren't worried about getting their degrees. It's an opportunity for them to coach. And if they happen to get their graduate degree in the process, then so be it. And many of those GAs end up being there for 3 and 4 years. And it's like, wait a minute now, a master's degree is a 2-year degree, but you see in football, they have all these GAs. So in baseball, when did we lose, or did we ever have the ability to have GAs and it went away, or did it not ever exist?
Yeah, it went away. I mean, it was the mid-'80s. It was unlimited to some degree. I remember talking to Jack Stallings, the coach at Georgia Southern, and I saw him in a USA event, and he had 7 graduate assistants at Georgia Southern. There's a lot of coaches who use that program to develop coaches, and there's a lot of coaches that are my age that went through that situation. But I think even from a graduate assistantship, not only when I look at minority coaches getting on the field to coach and teach, I look at graduate assistantships as a way to get minority coaches in the analytical field, in the video field, in other areas of baseball that will allow them to grow and surge at the professional level or the collegiate level for that matter. But I think it has to start there. And then, beyond that, and things that we've talked about too, Kerrick, is once you start developing coaches on the field, then we can start to move into NCAA representation, whether it's the committee, whether it's the ABCA, and representation at the executive level, which is needed. So our game is white for a reason, but I would say at least for young kids to want to pick it up and continue playing, they definitely need to see models of behaviors and models of people that are coaching and teaching the game that inspire a young man emotionally to continue to want to play it.
For sure. Kevin, what do you think on that?
Honestly, I think it's the coaches. I was sitting there thinking about why I played baseball, and I'll never forget. I was in high school, I was in practice one day, and I was kind of messing around, and my coach walks up to me, and he's like, "Man, you come to practice, you joke around, and you play around. You don't take this serious every day." And he was like, "You could be really good. Like you can be really, really good." And by the end of my high school career, I wound up getting drafted, and then got drafted. I actually got drafted twice, and I don't know. Like I was good at football, and I was good at basketball. I was a good athlete. I could run, I could throw, I could hit. I was born with the gifts, and but I think had Coach Franklin not told me that I was going to be a good baseball player, had I taken baseball serious, and I probably would have kept playing. Like that moment was the moment I knew that I wasn't going to play basketball or football anymore, and I didn't know that I wanted to be a coach until I was called to the profession. My buddy Rob Fletch, he called me. He had a team, and he said that he's like I've taken my team as far as I can go, and he's like you got a lot. Your career went a little bit better than mine. You probably learned a little bit more than mine. I need you to come work with these kids, and I was like, they were a bunch of inner city kids, and I told him I was working a good job and still playing baseball on the weekends in the beer leagues. And he's like, look, just come to one practice. And 5 minutes into that practice, I knew that I wanted to coach, and I haven't stopped coaching ever since. And I still have an awesome, awesome relationship with each and every one of those kids that were on that team. And it's funny because you don't know how you impact kids. And so like on that team, there were some kids who got into some trouble, and I was the first person that they felt like that they could trust to call. And to this day, those same kids still call me for when they make big decisions. And I think it's the coaching, and we can see baseball players on the TV, and like you can get your Tim Anderson throwing a bat into the dugout after a home run, or you can get Barry Bonds or guys like that. But I think it's like Coach Corbin said, like once you impact a kid's life in a positive way, there's no telling what their ceiling is going to be. Like I've dealt with kids. I had kids that have been rappers that have gone all over the world, and I think it's just from the confidence that they built playing baseball, the confidence that we instilled in them while they were playing baseball. I got kids that are lawyers. I got kids that are going to be doctors. And I got kids that have a chance to play in the major leagues. And I think it all starts with the coaches, because believe it or not, a lot of kids don't even watch baseball too much anymore. And that's a whole nother conversation.
Right. So on that one, specifically when we talk about coaches, as I look back over my career coming up as a head coach in my entire career of baseball, I had one black head coach. And the next time I came across a person of authority in the game was Dana. As my scouting director, the guy that hired me. And I got introduced to coaching from Mike Anderson, who was the assistant coach at Nebraska. And he took me to my first convention in 90, I believe it was January of 98 was when I went to my first convention out in California. And as I look back on that and know the place that I hold as a black coach, I'm very conscious of the idea of, hey, I only had one. And it was Coach Ford when I played for Matthew Dickey's Boys Club. And now in football, all my coaches were black growing up, minus me getting to high school. But my JFL coaches, they were all black. But in baseball, Coach Ford and Coach Albert, those were the only two black coaches that I had coming up through it. And so it definitely, I agree with you guys when you talk about that coach piece. Dana, what I would ask you is on the professional side of things, and when we look at we know that there's a lack of black players playing the game. What do you contribute that to, aside from some of the things that we've already talked about? And one of the things that I always lean to is I'm a huge Cardinals fan. And there's at one point back in the 80s, you could look out on the field and everybody on the field for the Cardinals was black except for Tommy Herr and Darryl Porter, the catcher. And The Cardinals at one time had the largest minor league organization. The Royals are notorious for, I shouldn't say notorious, but are well known for what they did and how Frank White and some of those guys got opportunities because the academy theme that they started in Kansas City at that time. So kind of what would you contribute to where we're at in professional baseball with a lack of black players in today's game?
Yeah, so Kerrick, this is a complex problem, right? So there's not like one bullet that you can shoot to sort of answer this problem. So coaches are very important. I agree with you. I'm in the same boat. I had one black coach. It was for Legion baseball. I think I was 17 years old. One black coach. The rest of my life, I played football and I played basketball also. I had all black coaches. So I'm sort of in the same boat that you're in. But it's a complex problem with so many moving parts. But if I could go back to what Dr. Brooks and also Trey said. So here's the issue. So Trey talked about this issue of not having the money. So it's clearly a wealth gap, right? And the one thing, and for the viewers, I don't want to hammer this point too much, but people have to understand, like, this is a systemic problem. The wealth gap is a big issue. So, I mean, the financial experts will tell you that the African American is 230 years behind the white in the wealth gap. So we just don't have wealth. We're getting jobs, but we don't have wealth. Wealth in terms of, having multiple homes or, your assets or whatever the case may be. And so it goes back to some of the issues we've faced in this country for a long time, and we just can't get away from it. So there was a point in this country where America was giving away land. You couldn't have land, though, if you were black, right? You just couldn't own land. They wouldn't give you the land. So that the land was an issue. There was a long time where they were giving out loans to blacks, so to create wealth, to have the money that we're talking about, to be able to play the game. Like from 1933 to 1962, the whole middle class was developed. And guess what? There was no blacks getting home loans. So this is a problem. And this was a big piece that Nicole Hannah-Jones brought up. I thought it was an outstanding piece. And I would suggest all the viewers to just Google it, go take a look at it. Here is part of the problem. And so we have this generation of kids growing up. And there was a time where it was 18% black. Now it's down to 7%. We have issues. We have issues that, we don't have. I was taught baseball by my older brother, right? So I grew up in a single parent home. So I was taught baseball by my older brother, Chris. So he introduced baseball to me. So it wasn't a dad there in the home to teach me baseball and to get me involved in baseball. So this problem is so complex with so many moving parts, and it's good that we're all talking about it, and it's good that we all have an ear to listen to some of the issues that are going on. But honestly, God bless the coaches like Corbin and the coaches that recruited me. When I was at Seton Hall, we had 5 minorities in our starting lineup in 1987. 5, and we had a Hall of Famer on that team by the name of Craig Biggio that was outplayed by Martise Robinson. Craig Biggio he had a great career, and Martise Robinson outplayed him. He went in the 5th round. Craig Biggio went in the 1st round. So, we have these issues for a long time. I don't even think Martise Robinson was turned in by the Major League Scouting Bureau that year. I don't think you could find a report. That's crazy. Guy led the country in hitting, Golden Spike Award winner, and he wasn't turned in by the Major League Scouting Bureau. So we need scouts to turn in players. Then we need coaches to coach the players, and we need some coaches to get involved. Whether it's African American coaches getting an opportunity to do a little bit more, but we're just not seeing it. We're not getting the same opportunities. Honestly, sometimes it's disheartening, but you have to keep pressing forward. The good thing that in this country now, we're really starting to talk about it. There's been long-standing diversity things that have been taking place. I know in Atlanta, we do a great job of having diversity. And I think it's really, even before this whole thing started. So it's really starting to spread throughout the industry and through some other clubs and maybe into some college coaching. But at the end of the day, the opportunity for the players are going to come when we can close this wealth gap, when we can get more black coaches, when we can get more black scouts. I remember when I was playing, I never saw a black scout. Honestly, I never saw no black scout ever talked to me, ever gave me a player info card or anything. I mean, if that's not true, they can call me up, they can email me, they can do whatever, but I can promise you I never spoke to a black scout when I was a player. Never. So, and I came out of Seton Hall, I was drafted in 1989. I'm sorry, I went there in 85, but I was drafted in 89. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's good that we're talking about this. We're going to try to close the gap. We have people with willing hearts that are now ready and prepared to do something about some of these issues that we've been facing. But I know we live in a microwave age. This is not going to take place in a microwave. I mean, this is going to be consistent change throughout, and there's going to be a process. And I'm just glad that we have more people talking about it, more people involved, and I think we're headed in the right direction.
For sure. And so going on that, Trey, what I would ask you is, I want you to talk about a time or experience where you witnessed some racism or prejudice in this game, in the clubhouse, on the collegiate side, or on the pro side, and just give us some examples of that and how that affected you and how you felt. Because I think as players, specifically black players, we've kind of all identified already to some extent. We're used to being the 1 or 2, 3 black guys on the team. And obviously with Dana talking about his situation where there was 5, I think that's the most that I ever played with, besides being when I went to Bethune-Cookman and besides when I played Matthews-Dickey. But every place else, it was, 3 or 4 of us on a team. So Trey, talk to us a little bit about that.
First and foremost, I would say also, I think it starts with the coaches. Coach Jackson, once again, back to you. Like, I went to the University of Missouri because you were the only black coach that recruited me. And my mom was okay sending me somewhere where she knew that somebody was going to look out for me. A lot of black households, they're not sure that the coaches and the people that they're sending are the ones that's going to look out for them. I would challenge everyone to look at the rosters and see where all the black kids are going, because we're all going to the same schools over and over again, because all of us black players, a little small group that we know, we all know each other and we ride for each other harder than I bet any other group of people, because it's just not that many of us. So we all know what schools to go to and what schools not to. So it's not a coincidence that we're going to the same ones. But I would say those instances. So I would say the biggest one that sticks out in my mind at the University of Missouri that happened, and all my former coaches know about this incident and everything, and they have addressed it and they've said their pieces on it, and we've cleared the air. But there was a topic. There was Barack Obama had a State of the Union address, and it was right after Sandy Hook, and he was talking about gun control and things like that. I've never once, I've never once really brought it up, because those are just things you don't talk about. But the very next day, I go and I'm going to 6 a.m. workouts, and my locker, I can't find it. It's like it's something weird going on. I look over and I'm like, oh, this is my locker. And my locker is covered up with a flag that said, if you want my guns, come and take it. So I rip it down real fast. I'm mad. Then there's another flag that says, don't tread on me. Rip it down. And then you finally get to see my locker. So when I give this instance, I want you to know that, like, my entire locker is covered, right? My name doesn't show anymore. Mind you, at this time, there's maybe 1, maybe 2 black kids on the team that year. And I'm furious. I'm mad about it. I think I ended up punching a hole in the wall, because I just felt like there was no one there with me that had to deal with it. Like, I was by myself and someone has blatantly attacked me, right? And then the part that really was the kicker for me is that as a team, we never addressed it. It was like it didn't happen. So if we don't go to class on time, we run. If we don't get the GPA, we're penalized. We don't get the community service, we get penalized. But yet we're just okay with the racist activities going on in our own locker room. So that was the first thing. So I'm like, so I guess they really don't care about how I feel. So that was the first thing. Second thing, one of my best friends, Michael Davis, he's a manager for our team, did a lot of cool videos. He wrote his name on a board. And right after he named with a name on the board, our whole team always did this, right? All our team did it. It was like a little rite of passage. He wrote his name on the board and someone circled it and put the N-word next to it. Wow. So these are like, we're just with my teammates and with our players, and someone did this. So now I'm looking around like, I can't tell who did it. I don't know who did it. And I know my other teammates saw who did it, but no one had my back. No one in the locker room thought that that was going to be a problem. Everyone thought it was okay. Okay, so that instance happened. So now you got to think about my 4 years. So I'm grinding, busting my butt at 6 a.m. workouts, throwing up next to these guys. I hit a home run, they're the first ones out there. I do something good, they're the first ones out there. But yet when I really needed them, they were nowhere around. Okay, another instance. I'm at a party, hanging out, chilling. This actually happened at the same party when I tell these two stories. A kid grabs me by my hair. First off, grabs me by my hair. It's like, man, your hair feels really different than mine. He's grabbing it like this. Then he goes, you know you my N-word, right? You know, I'm not allowed to say that, but, you know, I'm drunk right now. So you know you my N-word, right? So now you got to remember, I'm from the South. So he just said pretty much that I'm his. I'm his now. I'm his. Like, you know you mine. Come on, bro. Like, who are you? So then that instance happened. So then at the same party, this girl walks up to me and is like, Trey, you can't believe what I just heard. 2 players on our team at the time, 2 players, and I know their names, will not say it. They literally go, hey, man, you should own land, and you should own land, and we should get all the black kids to be our slaves. Bro, this is in 2018. So mind you, these are just little instances. These are the big things that I noticed. These aren't even the little, like, jabs where, like, a kid asked me, because I was black, did I go play basketball in Harlem? First off, I'm terrible at basketball, so I don't know if it was a rite of passage to go play basketball in Harlem was like the mecca for black people. Like, we got to go to Harlem to go hoop. Like, come on, we got to be better than that. So, like, just those instances over and over again, like, after a while, you look around and you're like, I don't care for any of these people because they didn't care for me when I needed them the most. At this point, now I'm realizing that I'm just here to hit home runs. Like, I know why I'm here now. Because if it was for me to be a person, it wouldn't have happened. Because my teammates, like, whether there's 2 instances where the coaches knew, but the other 3, my teammates never even stepped up and said that, hey, bro, that was messed up. I don't know who did it, but if I find out, I got your back. Nobody did that. But then they wondered why I never went out with them. I never went to social functions just with them. Because what if something happened to me when we're at like anywhere? Like, who's going to have my back? I don't know. So that's why I stopped going out. So I think that, like, as you know, I know there's a lot of coaches here, like, you have to address these issues that you're seeing every day. Last instance, a kid told me in the outfield, we're doing outfield drills where you pretty much you talk the whole time because you're doing outfield drills. So there's a lot of in-between time. He goes, you don't understand the meaning of the Confederate flag. So I'm from Georgia and I don't know the meaning of the Confederate flag. Come on, bro. So I'm jawing at him. I'm upset. We come to the dugout and I'm still mad about it. Like, you have to remember the Confederate flag stands for slavery. That's, in my mind, that's what it is. So, and to all black people, that's what it is. And I'm being cut and dry right now and real. So if you don't feel that way, I'm sorry, but that's how we feel. So that's how I interpret it. That he didn't know that I understood what slavery meant. So then our coach comes in and goes, Trey, why do you always have to bring in race? First off, we're not going to address the kid who just said it. I don't know the meaning of the Confederate flag, but let's address the kid who's upset that his own race was challenged. That's the problems that we have. Like, we have to address these issues and hit them straight on. We address everything else. Oh, 2 kids get into a fight. Let's talk about it. Let's say sorry. But, like, a kid being blatantly racist, we didn't even address it. So now, like, we have to understand that, like, now you're setting a precedent for how I'm supposed to feel every day. Every day in the locker room, I got this chip on my shoulder that I can't even talk about because, one, there's not really any coaches that I can talk to about it because they don't quite understand. And I think that's where we're missing the boat, is that we're not challenging our locker room talk. Like, these kids, I'm here, I'm telling you, I wish I could remember all the things I heard, but as a black baseball player, you almost get so used to it that it doesn't matter anymore. Like, it's just like, hey, I got to deal with it. It's a part of the game. You just go in your group text, you're like, bro, you really couldn't understand what I heard today. Or you go talk to your football friends and tell them about it. And it's like, we're not addressing the root of the issue, and we're not helping our black players feel comfortable in their situations at all.
No, I agree with you. And I've had conversations with guys, obviously, since all this stuff has taken place, and predominantly white coaches that would ask me, hey, how do we go about addressing this? And one of the things that I told everybody is, first of all, you have to admit that you may have said or done something that could have been that could have offended some of your minority players, and let them know that. Come out and say that, and then in turn give them permission to hold you accountable in the right setting at the right time if you say something that they may take offense to. Because if you don't give them that opportunity to hold you accountable for you saying something slick, then all you do is create some more animosity and separation in that clubhouse. So many coaches will say, well, you know what? That's not our program. We don't allow that in our clubhouse. Everybody's the same. Well, the reality is everybody's not the same. The reality of it is you can't say that you don't see color. You can't say that, oh, that's Trey Harris, I don't see him as black. Well, then right then you're stripping him of who he is as a black man, and they don't understand how powerful those statements can be to demean those of us of color. And so I think it's having that understanding. And then the other thing I've told a couple of coaches too is, not only do you need to have these conversations with your team if you have minority players, but more importantly, you need to have the conversations if you don't have any. That if you don't have any black players or minority players in your locker room and clubhouses, those are the guys that you really need to sit down and you need to have that conversation with, because again, it becomes an ideology, it becomes a belief system, and then now all that does is grow and fester. And then now when you do bring that black player into your clubhouse, they have no place to turn and they don't feel comfortable because of all these other things that have taken place. Scott, why don't you kind of tell me kind of the same question to you is, give me an example of where you experienced prejudice or racism in sport.
All right. And I'm gonna do what I did last time and double back for half a sec. So on the player and the coach, the chicken or the egg, I think that it is, as Dana said, it's complicated. I think that we've got multiple levels. As Kevin said, a coach kept him going. But before that coach, Kevin was already playing. Dana talked about his brother teaching him the game. We know that kids join these games organically by just playing with their friends. I think that we're underestimating the value of the player. I think that the player is heavily influential. And I think if you're looking at the numbers, we're more likely to get numbers of players into a program if they do the things that Coach Kerrick has done. They're developing like Coach Kevin. If they're finding them like Coach Corbin, as Trey said, if they're putting in that extra time, I think that players can make a huge difference, because what you get is players looking for players, as Trey said, right? But that doesn't mean coaches aren't important. The other thing that Kevin is highlighting is what happens at a youth level. So before we even get to college, you need these old heads. You need the guys at the young level to make sure that they're playing, that they're staying, that are deeper than just coaches. They are about these young men's lives. They're pouring into them. They're believing in them when the kid doesn't believe in themselves. That's what Kevin talked about. This is what you see again and again with black coaches at the youth level, is that when a guy talks about it, so this is the importance of that coach, you get, they believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I didn't know I had this talent, right? You got a guy who's telling you that they care about you. They're taking you home, making sure you're safe. So it's a complicated piece. The other problem is, if you just think about coaches and we were to bring them in, you got to talk about narrative equity. You can bring in a coach at a GA level. And I know I'm not trying to criticize Coach Corbin for saying, I'm just highlighting how power works. If you bring in a black coach at a GA level, is he really going to be comfortable to respectfully challenge what's going on at the highest level? Or does he have to worry about himself and how he keeps being paid and say, you know what, I can only do so much? So I'm looking at saying you got to be able to attack this at multiple levels. Coaches are definitely important, but if you're looking at the youth level, youth get involved in sports not because of a coach, unless we're talking about their parent, their brother, whoever is coaching them, being in their family. They get into it because the peers are doing it. And we got to get an investment into these communities. There are plenty. You look at basketball, they start with, if they're coming from the inner city,
their coaches are black, but by the time they get to college, what happens? They become white. By the time they get to the pros, they become white. You don't have to have black coaches. It is wonderful. It does something different. It's empowering, but black athletes have always been able to adapt. They know what they've got to do. So it's a complicated mix, to get back to what Dana was saying. When I look at this, and Trey is highlighting so many things, we've got, what are these institutions, right? How are they supporting blacks, period? As a black student, is this a place that is safe? At Missouri, where Trey is, Coach Kerrick, KJ was with me. I was a professor there, got personal death threats in 2015. Football players protested after a graduate student goes on hunger strike, and students have been protesting peacefully for a year after Michael Brown's murder. All three of us were there. When you look at this, Missouri was not a safe place for anybody who was black. So therefore, you can expect that Trey is going to get that treatment. This is what all of the students got, right? So when you're looking at what Coach Corbin is doing to create a conducive environment in Vanderbilt, and I've never been to Vanderbilt, so I don't know exactly what that feels like, but we talked about them having 3 black athletic directors in a row. Does that tell us that maybe Vanderbilt is doing something different, that they're showing that they value blackness, that they're not just thinking about them as bodies, as athletes? I think it does show something like that. So this gets us back to, it's not just a coach, it's also the importance of having a black athletic director. It's also important to have black administrators at the provost level, at the president level. Like, we need that equity. We need to have voices in positions of power throughout the university, because you can't expect one to have to shoulder that burden. That one person does great. Coach Kerrick was already great before that. He gets his head coaching job. Then what happens at Missouri? If it only relies on one person, we're in a whole lot of trouble. Trey would probably argue that wouldn't have happened if Coach Kerrick was there, right? That they wouldn't have done that in that locker room. Mm-hmm. So it's too much to put on one person. So when we look at what's going on, just as you said, Kerrick, the same is unequal. It's because we are already unequal. So you can't treat me exactly the same. When I've had students say, hey, professor, I need extra time on this paper, but I don't want you to treat me as special. And it doesn't even make sense. They're speaking out of both sides of the neck. And I say, of course you want to be treated special, but that's okay. You are special. I'm all right with that. Like, we need to acknowledge that people will have different needs, that they're going to come from different backgrounds, even when they look alike. Even if they're white, I got to treat them as somebody special. I got to see them as an individual. It's not that you got to see everybody as black and therefore deficit. We have the largest black middle class we ever had. And while we point out that the cost of baseball, we know that youth sports is now a $19 billion industry. Parents are paying money. If they thought that baseball was really going to do it and they had access to everything, I'm telling you, Matt Kemp talked about, I had a football scholarship. I had a basketball scholarship. I went to baseball because I could tell I could compete there, right? There's middle classness that could happen in this. But if it's not in the inner cities, blacks are no longer only in the inner cities, but they're in black enclaves, right? There's all these problems, again, of that pipeline. So quickly, to talk about this racism, I just want to highlight what you've talked about in terms of coaches and what they can do. I would tell you that we are beyond the time. Yes, an individual white coach needs to step up and acknowledge that they have probably said and done things. What I see is the shrug, that at a certain point, doesn't matter how many promises they made to Trey, at a certain point, most coaches are going to say, I can't bend over backwards for one individual or two individuals. And so they're going to kind of shrug it off. Trey, what do you want me to do? I can't do everything. I can't solve all these problems. I can't be But their promise to you when they started was this was going to be a family, that this was going to be a safe. So now you've already betrayed that athlete and you have made this a transactional relationship. Now I'm just here to get what I need to get because you have shown me you only need to get something from me. When I'm thinking about that as a coach, A coach needs to be on campus pushing for a better environment for all Black students and students of color. Their job is not to simply be on that field, because where is your athlete going to get to be on campus and be safe? Trey is already telling you, I'm not safe on my team. Where could he go? He's going to parties and he's getting assaulted there too. In the same way, as coaches, we are bigger than just our teams. Look at our salaries. We are bigger than that. We have to embrace being a part of the community, getting across the street and getting on campus, pushing policies, pushing legislation, pushing our presidents to do more for students of color. So I'm not just bringing a kid of color into this sea of whiteness that is going to be hostile where I cannot be there for them. So coaches have to do more than simply worrying about their team. And then, yes, they need to really take a look after acknowledging it. You need to do an assessment. What's going on with my team? How am I playing certain players? Right? I need to really take a close look at that. What am I doing with my players? How am I showing value? Am I waiting for 4 years to go get my next Black player? Or am I following it up year after year? Am I making greater contacts in these communities, catching the Kevin Coes and making sure I go, Kevin, I can't get your top player, but where else can I go? Kevin's got a network. There's other people, right? So there's a lot of different work. I don't want to spend too much of our time talking, but there's a lot of different work. Coaches have to think of their position as bigger than what it is. They got to acknowledge that the problem is far bigger than them, and they do have influence. They can go and be a part of the campus and do bigger bridge building, making sure that this is a safe space.
Definitely. I will give an example of my own, and then I think JR has a question that we had somebody send in to us. But mine, from a professional standpoint, came most recently. It was actually last summer. My first year here, we were 9-33, finished last place in the conference. We're dealing with some NCAA penalties and some other things. And then year two, we turn it around. We go to first place in the conference. We have some significant wins throughout the course of the year, win our conference championship, go into a regional, and I get offered some jobs that summer. One job in particular that I was offered at a predominantly white institution, didn't feel like it was the right move for me at this time. Another job that I was intrigued by. I go through the interview process, do 2 phone interviews, thought the phone interviews went really, really well. And I get a call from the associate AD telling me that they wanted to thank me for everything that I had done, that they had cut it down to their on-campus interviews, and it wasn't anything that I didn't do because my resume and experiences were phenomenal. It was just that the people that they were bringing on campus had better resumes. At the time, I had no point of reference. I couldn't argue and say anything other than, man, I got this far. I got 2 interviews for a head job based on after being a head coach for 2 years. So be it. And then they hired the person that they hired. I don't, by no means, this is no disrespect to that individual, but our resumes don't match up. And for me, that was that first aha moment to, if you would have brought me on campus for an interview and then said that we're going to go in this direction, I can't argue that, because you felt that that person was the best person for that job at the time. And I have no argument to that. I can't say, well, my resume was better than his, I should have got the job, because again, you're going to hire who you want to hire. But when they prefaced it by telling me that I didn't make the on-campus aspect of the interview process because my resume wasn't good enough, that's then where I have a problem, because that couldn't have been further from the truth when it came to that. Now, might have been that they had no intention of hiring me anyway, so don't waste the time. That part I don't know. But at that point, it wasn't just based on the merits on paper, because the merits on paper at least should have brought me in for an interview. And then if you hire the other guy, you hire the other guy. And so, like I said, from a professional standpoint, that was kind of that aha moment. I will have to say, professionally, I've been blind to it, because this is the only time that I've ever worked at HBCU. Every other place I've worked has been at predominantly white institutions. And going to Missouri, Coach Jameson, when he hired me as the first black assistant coach in the Big 12. When I was in the SEC, I was the only black assistant in the SEC. And then Coach Corbin and I talked about this. I don't know the history of it, but I may have been the first full-time paid assistant in the SEC at the time, and probably for sure recruiting coordinator. And like you said, when Dana, you were talking about, 89, we're talking about 2015. And so I think that we do have a ways to go, but there are coaches out there that do have the ability to do it. But if you're not in that right space, you don't get those opportunities. If I didn't run in certain circles, I don't have those chances. I don't get hired by the Nationals because Dana never finds out about me if it's not for me being around the scouts that were in my area that say, hey, here's a guy that's looking for a job. You might want to reach out to him because I think he would be good. So that's my experience with that on the professional side. JR, why don't you go ahead and ask Coach Corbin that question that we had?
Yeah, no problem. Coach Corbin, this question comes from Stephanie Dillard from Bryan High School in Bryan, Texas. She's a 4-year ABCA member, and she's really curious to find out what you do at Vanderbilt to promote a culture that accepts diversity within your program, and in what ways do you support and encourage your players to example that culture, model that behavior out in the classroom and the community?
Well, you mentioned classroom. I mean, there's a conscious effort to create an inclusive roster that reflects the needs of the group, and that's been the case ever since we got there in 2002. That was very intentional. I think to what Trey was talking about, that those types of stories right there, that, and I'm not going to explain why those happen, but the basic premise of what I would explain is, as a leader or a coach, you're a protector. You're taking on the responsibility of the needs and the emotions of all the players, support staff, and staff members. And if you can't do that, you are not creating what Scott said is an environment where people feel safe. The participants don't feel safe. And Trey didn't feel protected. He didn't feel protected at all. And when you build an inclusive environment, inclusive, not exclusive, inclusion brings comfort, exclusion brings discomfort. And if that's very foundational, and if your program is built on foundations where this is how we treat humans, we are not going to homogenize our group. We are going to allow people to be the individuals that they are. And when they decide to be part of a group, they go from independence to interdependence. But part of being interdependent is understanding that you're protecting the person on your left, protecting the person on your right in every situation. And in the matter of being on the field, that's the 5 and the 6 hours that a coach and a support staff can control. But how he controls the other 18 hours where you're not on a field, and the hours that Trey's talking about, that's foundational. That's being able to bring people into an environment that are inclusive of each other, inclusive of their beliefs, welcome of their beliefs, and they do not foster communication that demeans other individuals. And I mean, I think that's the start. That's the start of your program. That's the beginning of your program. That's before you roll out a ball. That's before you start swinging a bat. If those foundations aren't in place, then a kid like Trey is never going to feel protected inside of an environment. The key for any leader is to have an environment that is protective of everyone inside that environment. And you're not worth your salt if you can't get to that point where kids can walk away and say, you know what? It doesn't matter what color you are inside this environment. You are protected by the people inside of it and the support staff that runs it.
No, good. And I think about something as simple as music played during BP and or practice. I remember an instance where we were at Vanderbilt, and did Dansby wear number 5?
He wore number 7.
Okay. I can't remember who it was. Somebody wore number 5. And their walk-up song was, I Got 5 on it. And in my head, I said, man, that's pretty good of Coach Corbin, because I don't know if he really knows what that song is about. but he's allowing it to be his walk-up song. And I think as Black players, we've all been in those situations where you've had that older coach, turn this rap mess off. This isn't baseball. Whoa, wait a minute now. Just something as simple as that of saying, turn this music off. You're alienating your players that listen to hip hop and rap. Now, you don't have to have all the foul language and those types of things, but those simple statements, like you said, if you're not conscious and aware of everybody that's involved in your program and what that may mean to them, it can do damage. And so I think that was good that you're able to talk on that. Let's talk about institutional and systemic racism as it pertains to baseball. And there's so many things. I think we've uncovered some of it to this point, but I think there's so many layers and we could go really, really deep into this. But I think this will also give people that are on and listening an idea of some of these things that we're talking about and how deep it goes. We made comments, I think Dana talked about the housing market, and I watched a video that my brother-in-law sent me a week ago, where basically there was a man who explained what the housing market was back in the 50s and 60s and where suburbs started, and how that in the in the contracts of these homes, you could not sell them to Black folks. And these same suburbs that people were buying for $9,000 and $10,000, all of a sudden tripled and quadrupled, and in some instances tenfold in their value. And now they had all this equity, and then that equity that they had in those homes allowed them to put together college tuition for their kids or trust funds or whatever. And Black folks were denied that. And so I think there's some aspects of the game that involve institutional and systemic racism. So let's talk about those. Kevin, you go ahead.
Well,
and speak to it for you. Speak to it specifically in that youth travel ball space, kind of where you're familiar and how that affected some of the things that you guys were doing.
It starts recruiting, and so and it kind of trickles down all the way. Like, I've had teams that were 100% minority or African American, and we beat a team that felt like they shouldn't lose to a black team, and like not come out of the dugout and shake our hands at the end of the game because we whooped them pretty bad, and or coaches kind of belittling everybody and sore losing because our teams were really good. But I think recruiting wise, it's I just don't think it's fair. Just say, for instance, like when you were at Missouri, like you offered multiple kids from the Chicagoland area. I don't know if Missouri's been back to the Chicagoland area since you left. If they have, it's a small percentage of compared to what you were doing. And it's not because our kids can't play. It's a situation where I just don't think we get a fair shot. Like, our kids do PBR. We do perfect game. We've had some kids that were rated pretty highly in both services, but still those same kids have gone on to like a Louisville or Michigan or several other Big Ten schools and not have scholarship offers from any of our in-state schools, like a Eastern Illinois, Western Illinois, or Illinois State or anything of that nature. It's like our kids can play and they understand how to play the game, but just kind of recruiting wise, excuse me, I think I just don't think we get a fair shot, and a lot of it has to do with the color of skin. We had this conversation the other day, like do colleges develop players, or do you have to come in ready made? And I think regardless, like most of our players that come out of the Chicagoland area, out of some of our elite programs, they're ready to play at any level against any competition, and we just don't get a fair shot at compared to, like, you see some kids get scholarship offers at universities, and you're like, the kid, and you're like, what's going on here? Like, we have kids in our program that are better, have more tools, have better character, have better grades, better ACT score, and like there's no interest. And so it's not unique. It's just, it's what we have to deal with here in Chicago. We have to be better at everything. We can't be good. We can't be great. We have to be phenomenal in order for us to get a fair shot or a fair opportunity from kids from our community. And that's why we work. We work hard. Like our kids, we train our kids. A lot of the drills you see on social media in terms of like fielding and hitting, like a lot of it started right here, what we were doing, we felt like, and it kind of grew and morphed into something that a lot of the other trainers are doing around the country. But we practice pretty hard, and I just want to voice that, like, college coaches, if you are listening, there are kids in Chicagoland area that can play Division I baseball at any school in the country if you give them a fair shot. So,
for sure, Dana, talk about it with respects to institutional systemic racism, with respects to the professional side, baseball wise.
I'll try to keep this simple. I know when the whole George Floyd thing came out and went down, it really felt comforting to hear a guy like Theo Epstein, who's the president of Chicago Cubs, say, you know what, maybe I have to look at my practices on hiring. And I read that and it was jaw-dropping. And I was like, wow, now it sounds like that we may have the ear of a lot of people who are in charge. And so I look at situations like that, and I don't want to complicate this, but it's as simple as that. It's as simple as looking at the man in the mirror and saying to yourself, who have I hired? What have I done to create an opportunity for diversity in an organization, and rolling with it? I mean, you had a man that went public and he was honest and said that. And to me, that was a powerful moment. We'll be looking to see who he hires and all of that other stuff. But honestly, it was a powerful moment in my mind. And it basically said to me that, hey, we're not looking for a handout. But if you find an African-American or a minority who's qualified for a job, you know what? Give them the opportunity. Give them the chance. And I know myself, I had 2 interviews for GM jobs, one with the Mets, the New York Mets, and one with the Seattle Mariners. And I felt more comfortable with the Seattle Mariner job. I thought maybe I had a shot at getting that job. But this whole thing of getting even a GM job, and maybe now this is an opportunity where owners will look at themselves and say, you know what, maybe I've been closed-minded as to creating opportunities. And maybe if this guy comes in and he has a great interview and things go well, that maybe I should give this guy a shot. I think when you have people who look in the mirror and say, hey, man, there's an opportunity here. So you know what, maybe we could give this guy a second look. I mean, I think that speaks volumes, because it's always troubling to me. I remember Tim Anderson when he went in the first round out of a junior college. I think it was in Mississippi. And a year before, he went undrafted. And he had players on his team. And I just, honestly, for this one, it troubles my soul so bad. It's like, how in the world did this guy go from being undrafted to the first round? I mean, it's the same guy. And apparently, a cross-checker saw him in the summer, kind of raised the flag. Other guys got in. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the scouts were looking at. I don't know if they picked them apart. Why did they pick them apart? It's just things like that you see in the game that drives you crazy. It's like this guy went from undrafted with players on his team that were drafted his freshman year to the first round. And now we all flew in there to see him the next year and nobody knew about him. And so that can't happen in our sport. I'm sorry. We got to get better. And I don't know what happened. Maybe there was a reason for it. It just doesn't pass the smell test, though. So, I mean, I would say that maybe now that we're in a position where people are starting to look in the mirror, they're not being super critical. They're looking for consistency and character and some of the things like that. And they're not looking for perfection because there's no one that's perfect. And so, I think that's where it's going to start. And it's good that we're actually having a conversation and that people are starting to look in the mirror. And, I work for Alex Anthopoulos, who he's not afraid to hire minorities, man. I just got to tell you that. He's just not afraid. It's a great thing. And he has an open mind, which is a wonderful thing. And I think when people in leadership positions get to the point where they could say, you know what, I like this guy. There's something about this guy that I like, it happened to me early in my career when Paul Tennell and Kim Bonifay gave me a shot to get into scouting. So, I mean, there's been people like that, but there's been this whole issue of, you know what, I'm looking for somebody different. And I think now people are taking a look in the mirror, which is something that is encouraging.
For sure. Coach Corbin.
Well, I'm just going to work off of Dana. I mean, this is an educational call. This is a continual education for a lot of people that are outside and listening to this. It's an acknowledgement, and it improves your awareness. But you got to take your awareness and turn that into actions. I mean, that's the most important thing from this. And I think like a lot of things in our world, and even going back to people, women's rights in 1920s, their suffrage movement, you had all these people moving to get women to vote, but the people that did all the work, they never saw the fruits of their labor. And I think everyone on this call, including the kids that Trey had someday, you're going to see movement, you're going to see incremental movement, but the movement that we all want is the movement that doesn't see a minority player as a minority, doesn't see a minority executive like Dana as a minority. They look at just people at the opportunities based on the people above them that have acknowledged that action needs to be created, and you're aware of it, but the awareness that you have, it needs to turn into actions. And that's why this call is being had. I mean, ABCA is an educational organization, and the ABCA can take this and move with it too, because this is just the beginning of it.
For sure. One of the things that I have said and truly believe is that at some level, I think we all have some level of subconscious racism and prejudice in us. And I believe it's institutionalized in us from the school system of in elementary school. Your first introduction to Black folks in history is that of slavery. And so for the white students that you have, the fact that they see that Black folks were at one time property, and for the Black kids that are there, that they see that they were one time property. When they talk about Egyptians in school, they're Egyptians, they're not Black, they're Egyptians. No, they're Black. And so not even understanding that coming from kings and queens and greatness and those types of things. They don't talk about periods of prosperity among Black Americans. And so we miss out on that. So then if you're not educated in another manner, then you come out with that subconscious belief that you're not as good. And then when it goes to the game, again, now we're talking about the idea of a predominantly white sport with a few Black kids playing it. You got to have the right buy-in. If you come from a certain neighborhood where all your friends are, man, what are you doing over there playing baseball? That's a white man's sport. You need to be over here. And like Trey said, he can't play basketball. So he just would have been out there. And so I think that when we look at that aspect of it, that's where it becomes very, very clear is there's some stereotypes that exist in baseball when it comes to Black players, coaches, scouts, et cetera. And we have to be able to open people's minds up, like you talked about, Dana, and get them to change their beliefs. Scott, tell me for you, on that topic of institutional systemic racism in baseball?
So, yeah, a quick plug, Global Sport Institute, where I head up research. We are coming out with our baseball field study. So we've done a NFL, we've done a Power Five. Power Five's not released. We're working on our baseball. So I've got just some preliminary data. It's a 10-year snapshot at hiring. And so we're looking at managers of color as well as white managers. And so, I'm going to lead into talking about it by giving you a little bit of what we're seeing. All right. When you look at white incoming managers over the last 10 years by position, you will find that 15% of these white incoming managers were catchers, 23% were infielders, 5% outfielders, 5% were pitchers. Now, we've got managers of color all lumped together. So knowing what baseball's demographics are, you'll know that blacks make up a smaller percentage than what I'm giving you. All right. But you've got 1% of incoming managers of color. Again, their field position that they played as a player were catchers. So that tells you it was not a black player, right? Infielders were 8%. I'm sorry, I am messing up my percentages. I'm looking at exact numbers. 7% were catchers, 57% were infielders, 35% were outfielders. You're not going to have any pitchers, right? From managers of color. There wasn't a single pitcher who is now a manager. You know that blacks have been stereotyped as not being smart enough to be catchers. That's old. Right. So it's those thinking positions. Right. So I had messed up on my percentages on the white side too. So let me give you those percentages again. For white incoming managers, their last playing position, 30% were catchers, 46, almost 47% were infielders, 10% outfielders, 10% pitchers. So when you put these together, any managers of color have to be infielders or outfielders. They're not coming through pitchers. And think of how we look at who's playing in the pitching position and who's playing in the catcher position. It doesn't have to matter, except we know that when you think about this as being institutionalized, we have trajectories and the normal trajectories. So what are the normal trajectories for becoming a manager, right? And this is where you get to how important the numbers are. Even though only 10% of white incoming managers were pitchers, there are 0 managers of color who were pitchers. And so that tells you that that's probably not the route for managers of color, right? That they're not going to be able to come through that route. Catchers, they only made up 7.1%, but you don't have any black American catchers. Right? That's 7.1 of incoming managers of color. Catchers, when you're talking about white managers, were 30%. That's almost a third. So if you don't have any black catchers and a third of managers who are white come through catcher, then that's not even your route. You're not even in that lane. So you get institutionalized, right? This is the steering, the stacking that players get at the younger ages. When you're steered away from catcher, you don't have as much an opportunity to become a manager. If you are steered into the outfield, you don't have as much of an opportunity to become a manager if that's not the normal trajectory. So then how does that become systemic? Well, if organizations start, and they do, general managers and owners start to think, well, hey, you know what? Pitchers would make a good manager. Well, why? Well, I can think of the pitchers who are managers. Catchers would make a good manager. Well, why? Because I can think of the managers who are catchers. It doesn't have to be that you are deliberately thinking about this in a racist way. It's about doing the normal things that you do, but how it has a racist impact, and then how that happens again and again and again. So these patterns, when you look at hiring, and particularly in sports, we're copycats. So you know the stats on football where the normal trajectory for football head coaches is through offensive coordinator.
which often means that they were quarterbacks. And you get back to the same problem. So not an individual not behaving racist, just making an individual decision about a manager and thinking about it in these ways that they have typically seen on the field, using that outcome as a basis for making a decision, leads to systemic racism. It's going to reinforce itself until somebody steps and says, you know what? We got a utility person that was good. This is the kind of opening your mind. But we are fighting against what has already been patterned, what has already been going on again and again and again. So the things that we are doing at the youth level in steering and moving players, the things we're doing at the college level by not creating a safe space, all of these things pay into the institutionalized and systemic racism. Again, it's all connected, right? And so when we think about these things, we have two issues. Trey is talking about it as a player and whether or not we're keeping a safe environment. What I'm going to emphasize when you're talking about change is power. Who is in the front office to help to disrupt the institutionalized thinking about what managers of color and blacks in particular are capable of, right? The way that this stuff goes, small percentages, like of all managers, the only managers who have not had major league or minor league baseball experience will be white managers. They get to be the exceptions. If you are a black manager, you had to have some playing experience at that highest level. You see the same thing in football. So now I'm adding even how it goes system on top of system. Sport by sport, you will see these same patterns of if they don't fit into that normal trajectory and it is different, there are different criteria for white head coaches and managers. They can never have played football at a college level, and we'll call them prodigies, savants, experts. Think of the descriptives, right? One of the things I heard, and you see it in baseball, the scouting. Scouts came out and said, we got to check our language. We got to check how, do we ever call a white kid raw when it comes to talent, right? We got to check these kinds of things. These are the patterns that we are contributing to. And individually, we can go, you know, it's not a racist thing. What it reinforces is deficit thinking. That's where the racism is embedded. This is what we all learn. And it's not just that this is what white folks learn. This is, you know, classic Dahl studies, Kenneth Clark that led to Brown versus Board and desegregation. Even black kids at the age of 5 and 6, when you put a black doll and a white doll, have been programmed by our society to think of black dolls as bad, as ugly. And this takes you back to the 40s and 50s, and they still replicate it and find the same things. You cannot be colorblind and think that this is going to go away. You can't be in your homes at the dinner table and think if we just don't talk about race, they won't learn racism. You can't be a coach, a manager with your baseball team and think if we just don't talk about it, it will go away. The movement to be anti-racist means it's not enough to try to be free and clear individually of racism. You have to attack positions of power. And that's why I said you've got to look for, can I help administration at the university level do different things? I need to be an advocate. Can I help make sure that we have people in diversity and inclusion? Coaches need to be pushing for it. You're not going to be able to do it all. You need somebody who's educated, who can sit there with you and help you do this. You can't rely and put this whole burden on all your black coaching friends. You got to be able to go to an expert. As black folks, if you're not educated in this, you can speak about your experience, but you may not be able to tell them all of the facts and the things that they need to know. People are professionals in this industry of diversity and inclusion. As Coach Corbin said, we need folks to rely and think about how important it is to include everybody. It is beyond your baseball. It makes your university great. It makes your student athletes come out and they're not doing things later on that hurt others.
Good. You make me want to feel like the offering plate getting ready to come around now.
I thought you already got it, man.
So one question that when he started talking about that aspect of it, and Dana and Coach Corbin, I'm gonna preface this by saying I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit with this, but what comes to mind for me is when we talk about the professional aspect of it. I know there's other aspects. There's signing bonuses and signability and all that. Does Kumar Rocker sign if he's a white pitcher?
He signed
out of high school. Does he get drafted and signed? And the reason why I ask that is because my time in professional baseball showed me that if you can't compare it to something, then professional baseball is going to shy away from it a little bit until it's a proven entity. And when you look at Kumar and who he was coming out of high school, there's no comparison to that. Like maybe the closest thing you could compare him to was a CC, but CC was left-handed. So now you have this big physical right-handed pitcher who doesn't have your prototypical body, but it's a big physical body. And for me, if he's a white pitcher, and again, like I said, let's take signability out of it. Does that idea of we've never seen that before, so we can't pay him whatever it is he's wanting to pay? And this is irrelevant of whether Kumar was set on coming to school or not. But just like I said, my time in professional baseball led me to believe that if you can't compare it to something and it's an anomaly, it's got to be off the charts anomaly for us to go and put the money in it before we make sure it's a proven entity.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I'll start off with this one because he was a prospect that was scouted. Then he went to Vandy. So yes. I mean, I would take full responsibility on saying that my personal evaluation on him, I thought the stuff was electric. I thought the kid was super talented. I thought he was a little fragile. And I thought that he needed to become a little bit more mature in his way of handling things. So I can only speak from my personal evaluation as a scout. There's no question if you take signability out of it, you take the talent. You sign the player, you put him in the minor leagues, and you say, okay, let's develop this kid. Let's get him going. Now, if you add the Vandy component, now you got to take him in the first round. Pretty much, you got to spend a lot of money. And am I buying him right now? And a big part of what we do, we have to buy into the makeup as the player. I've never really been burned in terms of, getting the evaluation wrong. Like I can scout. I know what good talent looks like. I tell you where I've been burned. I've been burned on missing on the makeup of the player, and is the player ready to handle the grind of the minor leagues and the competition, or does he need to grow at a different rate? I thought Kumar Rocker was talented. I thought no doubt about it, he could have signed. But when you add, like I said, the Vandy component, now it's like, okay, he's probably got to go in the first round. You probably got to, you got one bullet in the first round. And I went back to see him because I was with Toronto at the time, and we really liked him. I mean, we had guys that had big grades on him, number 2 starter. And I went back to see him, and I've talked to scouts about this. And maybe if Kumar is listening right now, he can take this as some criticism. But I saw him match up in the game against Wilcox, and he had a meltdown. I saw a meltdown. So mentally, I thought he was a little bit fragile, and I thought at the end of the day that if this guy goes to college, he's probably better off because of what you're going to have to pay him right now. He'll come out of college. He'll be tougher mentally. He'll be stronger in the whole 9. And I thought maybe he'd get in the strike zone a little bit more. And so at the end of the day, I would take personal responsibility as in terms of my evaluation of the player. And now, I mean, Coach Corbin could speak to, okay, Dana, I think you were wrong, or I think you were right. We had to get him to do this. And I saw him compete in the College World Series. I was like, whoa, this is different from what I saw. And maybe the way Coach runs things, you know, he's able to develop guys. And I know when I was in college, Coach Shepard would always say, you guys come in here as boys, but we're going to teach you how to become men. And at the end of the day, I thought he had some growing up to do. Talent-wise, he could have played, but I guess Coach Corbin could speak to if I'm right or not and if he was ready.
Well, and like I said, I was basing it more on the idea of, for me, it's something that we've never seen. You've never seen a big, physical black pitcher be a starter in the big leagues. And so then now, and I don't know what anybody's scouting evaluation was, but now all of a sudden we say, okay, he may not be able to start, so now he's a reliever, and because we think he's a reliever, and was that based on color? If he was a white kid, and everybody had their own different evaluations and reasons why that they didn't. But for me with him, that was the one thing that I thought stood out was, I remember one time, and it wasn't you, but I turned in a report and I made a comparison of a white kid to a black major league player and just got annihilated for it. Like, you can't compare a white kid to a black. Well, if they are similar other than their color and how they play, why can't I, right? But I just got killed on that at that time. So that was kind of my question was, like I said, all the factors you stated are reasons maybe why other people didn't take him. But I was wondering if it came down to if he would have been a white pitcher as physical with that stuff, is he not at Vanderbilt right now?
Yeah, and you could take race out of it because I'm a black scout. So
of course, yes.
I went in and I saw him and I said, hey, I love the talent. The opportunity cost was too high for me in the first round. Would you have taken him in the second round or third round if you thought you could sign him? Yeah, but when you had that one bullet in the first round, I thought the opportunity cost was too high. Regardless if he's black or white, it was purely based on evaluation and my assessment of his makeup. And Coach Corbin could probably speak a little bit more to the makeup side because he's had him.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, Coach, if you feel you need to comment, please do. But like I said, that was just kind of, I don't know if you've ever had anybody that's come through that's been that physical. And I mean, he was just different. Right. And like I said, my experience in pro ball is they don't like different until it's a proven entity. They kind of walk away from different. So that was my question on that.
Well, I think he had some modeling in front of him with David Price. I think that was someone who was big and physical and a little bit different frame, but left-handed. So there was kind of a mentor, so to speak, in front of him that had done that at Vanderbilt. And I think, to Dana's point, we were the recipients of youth, of someone who needed development of his brain, and parents recognized that. Mother was an educator. Dad was an NFL football player, is an educator himself, is a college football coach right now, an Outland Trophy winner. So I think for them to move their kid towards college they saw that as normal and they saw that as needed for him. So I think they recognized that. And the truth of the matter is that I think the young man did too. So, let's hope he prospers from it, which at this point he's done very well. I'm not going to say from a baseball standpoint, he's done very well from an emotional standpoint and a developmental standpoint mentally.
All right. Good. So let's go to some final thoughts. And we'll start with you, Trey. So final thoughts, solutions, whatever you kind of want to leave people with.
I had just like one or two things that were on my mind a little bit about some things. First off, I learned last week that Hank Aaron was a part of the Negro Leagues before he played in the MLB. I don't know how many guys know that, but a good first step is to educate yourself as a coach of these other black players besides Jackie Robinson. There's other black players before him, and there's black players that were better than him. But Branch Rickey, if you look back at it, he chose a player that could handle all the rest of the stuff that went with it. But we never hear about those guys. There's about 50 living Negro League players right now, and their stories are unique that are never heard. Why are we as a baseball community not hearing people who have endured some of the biggest adversity when we pride ourselves on challenge, like getting through adversity? That's our whole thing, is failure. And they legit were, had to be put in the league by themselves, and we've never talked about it. For all the coaches that don't know, the Negro League Museum is in Kansas City, Missouri. So those teams that come in and play Mizzou and they have nothing to do, there's a good 2-hour trip you can make that would literally open the eyes of so many kids. Did you also know that there was 10 Gold Glove Negro League players? I don't know how many people knew that. I didn't until I went to the museum for the second time. So there's so much history in Black baseball that we're losing out on just simply because we're not teaching it. Also, I played at East Cobb. I did all that. But as a Black player in the inner city, it does start at a very low level. Dr. Brooks brought up a point of it starts at the youth level. I played at Gresham Park, played at Sandtown Park. And if you're from Atlanta, you know that if you're Black, you go through these parks to prove yourself. And that's what really started my love for the game. I got to play in my environment with my teammates. It progressed to the 8 players that were a part of the East Cobb Astros team. All 8 of us started in a national championship game. And it was like, for us, it was like the biggest deal ever. I was actually told today that the reason that a kid that was younger than me played baseball is because he saw the 8 baseball players in front of him balling out at the highest level that he had known at the time. So I think you are right. You've changed my mind in this little combo that it does start with our players and seeing them over and over again. And then last but not least, but for me, it's about challenging yourself. Being able to look in the mirror and understand, like, man, I messed up. Now what can I do better? Be okay with having someone in the room that's going to say, like, that's not okay for you to say to a coach or to a player. Like, you have to word that better. There's not many people in these organizations, in the athletic departments, that are being advocates for the Black players at all. At least just acknowledging, like, hey, man, that's not probably what you should say. And I think that's what hits home for me, is that we have to feel like we are a part of the group, right? Like, we're not asking to be treated way different. We're just asking to be treated the exact same. Give me exactly what I deserve. My whole life I've been told you have to be twice as good as your white counterpart. And if in any sport, in my mind, it's baseball. A little backstory real quick. I hit 270 with 12 home runs my junior year. Didn't get a single call. I know a kid in the draft class who literally was caught with a picture with weed in his hand. Got kicked off his team. I didn't get a single call, but it was because of my character. Not sure what happened. The next year, I hit 311 with 11, and my character dropped me to the 32nd round. And the first thing that the Braves called me and said, hey, make sure you go in and do exactly what you're supposed to do and don't cause any ruckus. Okay, so this is supposed to be the biggest, time of my day, my biggest time of my life, and I'm already on eggshells. So it's about how you word it, how you go about it. What do you say first when someone does good? Like, if you see a kid dancing in the locker room, like, oh, that kid can dance because he's Black, or that kid just has rhythm. So watch what you say, how you say it, and in which the form that you say it in. There's always the wording, because as a Black player, as a Black person, we listen to all of that. And it's up to you to make the decision to address what's going on around you. So that's kind of what I got from all of that, is that we have to be better at understanding who we are and who are the people are around us.
Good. Dr. Brooks.
Yeah, and I'll try to be short and sweet on this. I think that one of the things that Kerrick, that you said that really resonates for me is for coaches to encourage respectful challenge, right? And that's in your one-on-one conversations, knowing and acknowledging that this is just by in natural circumstance, this is probably not the safest place. So I need you to talk to me about what's going on so I know what I can do. Right. So really encouraging that. I think the other thing is, thinking of this as a journey. As coaches in particular, I think we get to instances like racism and then we actually cop out. We don't go about our normal processes. So I've been a basketball coach off and on for 20 years. And,
been at public schools and travel ball and whatever and other spaces. And I would challenge you to think of what you do when you go into a program or when you take on a new team, right? So one of the things you probably do is figure out your vision. What do I think success can look like? And what can it look like here, right? Then you probably do an assessment. Where are we, right? And everything that's going to come down to equipment and facilities. But of course, it's also going to come down to players. What do we have, right? What do I think this group can do? You didn't think of what is it going to take to close the gap between your vision and this assessment of where you are. You're going to then strategize. What are the actual details? You're going to probably tell people where they're lacking, right? You're going to do some encouragement. This is that whole coaching up. I'm going to talk to you about what it is that I think I can see in you. We often are very optimistic, and we tell them, hey, if you work hard enough, if you do these kind of things, we give them a plan, right? Here's what we're going to do. You implement that strategy, and then what do? You make sure you have metrics that align themselves back to what that vision is, and you measure whether or not you're being successful. Why not do the same thing when it comes to racism? Why not do that same thing? The skills that you have as a coach, why not employ them? So if you were to do those same kind of things, one of the things that I'm thinking of is if you're looking at talent, we often hear there isn't enough of a pipeline. Kevin Coe's program is one of those that tells you that's not necessarily true. That doesn't mean that there's as many players as you would find with whites, but you're not going to find that anyway by percentage. The question is, can you find the right players for you, right? And you're going to have to stop with deficit thinking. When you're doing your scouting and your analysis, how quickly, when you are with black players, do you think of what they can't do as opposed to thinking of what they can do, right? And this is a coach kind of thing that's natural. We move back and forth between being optimistic and pessimistic, but you're more likely to be optimistic, again, in these things you don't know and categorize them as problems. So I would encourage you not to do that. Develop your plan with your vision first of what you imagine it can look like. Go through your steps as you would, thinking about how to develop your program, and be careful with the deficit thinking when you're evaluating players of color, right? What you want to do, if you were to really be specific, it's not that you go to the same places and look for the best talent. If you're really trying to identify this and you believe in your ability to develop players, you can go to where the best black players are, the best Latino players are, and then say, I can develop them because I see in them, right? The only question, if you think about yourself as a coach developing talent, is do I believe they have the work ethic? Do I believe that they're coachable? And if they are not giving you what you thought you could get from them, I want you to look at your system. It's not going to simply be about them. A great player who's great for Kevin Coe and he's not great for you, I need you to look at yourself. I need you to look at that journey and how they fit into that vision and then constantly reassess. Because if kids are not in the right space, I don't care how great they are, they're fighting against themselves, they're fighting against the impressions that others have, and they're fighting against history as well as that environment that's around it. That might be the campus, might be your high school, and you've got to do more.
Good. Kevin?
We got to level the playing field when it comes to youth baseball. I give kudos to Major League Baseball for recognizing that a few years ago, starting the MLB Develops program with, Tony Regans and Dale Matthews. They provide opportunity, but we need to do that from coast to coast. They have other urban youth academies, but I think Major League Baseball needs to, if your Major League team has a Latin American academy, why don't you have a United academy in the United States? Doesn't make sense. There's athletes that want to play baseball. They just don't have the resources. I have kids here that I have to give uniforms to, and their families don't know how they're going to pay for it. Like my program, we need money. There's several programs around the Chicagoland and the country that need money. to help, or just give the kids an opportunity to play baseball. Once we level the playing field and we get more kids playing baseball, so like Dr. Brooks said, like I have a nephew, he just committed to play football at Oklahoma, you know, and so there are athletes coming from this exact same community that play football and basketball at these Power 5 schools. Let's give them the same opportunity in baseball, and the only way we're going to be able to do that is providing resources for them.
Good. Dana?
Yeah, I would go back to close it out. I would go back to those 3 words that I brought up earlier. Opportunity is one. We have to create opportunity for minorities, whether it's on the field or in the front office or along the lines of coaching in college environments, whatever the case may be. The word oppression, understand that we've been an oppressed people for a long time. And now that we have the ears of a lot of people, I hope there's an understanding that we want to move forward. And then openness, be open and willing to help to create change so that at the end of the day, we're in a better place and we're more diverse in all aspects of our game.
Good. Coach Corbin.
I think simply this, I mean, white coaches and leaders, since I am that, we're the majority in this game. I think it's proven that we got to challenge ourselves and be part of the process. We got to stimulate the growth and be part of the growth. And that's where it starts. And recognizing that, educating yourself and be part of the growth process.
Good. So before I give you my final thoughts, just kind of share a couple things with you. This is obviously the kind of first event, if you will, that the diversity committee has had since we started back at the convention in Dallas. Again, thanks to Craig and the ABCA for creating this committee and asking me to be the chair. But our committee is made up of a group of individuals, and you'll have some information here that we'll show you at the end where you can sign up or send us an email, get us some information so that we can include you in this. But we have 2 major initiatives. We have a professional development initiative and we have a youth development initiative. With that youth development, we have a youth development subcommittee that we've gone out and we've asked Frank Robinson's family for permission, and with that with that professional development committee, and we've asked his family for permission, and so we have named it the Frank Robinson Coaches Association, and basically the goals of that committee are to create opportunities for Black and brown coaches at the professional, collegiate, and high school levels. Going back to one of the questions that we asked, coaches or players, I believe that the more coaches we can get out, that our kids can see, the better opportunity we have for them to play. And so that committee is set up in mind with the idea of creating more opportunities, educating people on resume building, educating people on networking, LinkedIn profiles, going through the interview process. We basically will look to consider ourselves a minority search firm, if you will. And so you'll have an opportunity to fill out a little questionnaire and we can get you more information on that. But that subcommittee is made up of Tyrone Brooks, Bonnie Hoffman, Spencer Allen, Mark Martinez, Richard Cantor, and Kimya Massey. And that group has a plan for another webinar that we're going to do on the 28th of July. And we'll be able to send out some more information about that to you if you guys kind of reach out. And then there'll also be some information sent out from the ABCA on that too. And then the other component is our youth development subcommittee. And that committee is made up of Tony Regans, Kenny Pullman, Steph Lewis, Mervell Melendez, and Jeremy Sheetinger. And their focus is to create an opportunity for Black kids and in the Black community to start to teach them to play the game with providing better coaching at the younger levels. I believe that we lose our kids at a certain point because we're not getting quality coaching. When you compare the coaching expertise of basketball and football at those youth ages, it far supersedes that of baseball in our communities. And so we're on a mission to develop better coaches that will put our kids in better situations, that will then in turn allow our kids to continue to grow and play the game and do basically my first experience was with the White Sox Aces program. Kids that came out of that program know how to play the game of baseball. They're not just athletic. They're not just, you can't call those kids raw. May they still need to develop? Most definitely. But as far as their baseball IQ went, it was very, very high. And that was always something for me that made it a pleasure going and recruiting those kids. So we're trying to create, our goal is to create something nationwide that will involve providing these types of opportunities for our kids in our communities. And then in turn, with the ultimate goal of being able to produce more quality baseball players coming out of the Black community. And so those are those two subcommittees. And like I said, July 28th, we will send some information out about that. Adam will put up a slide here at the end that'll give you guys some information, list of people in our community, give you our email address, and also give you the opportunity to have that link. My final thoughts are this, with all this stuff that's been going on, we've talked about it. And as I've told you all, my path and journey to where I am today, I've gone through a bunch of different things. I've been in a bunch of different places, from coaching in Connecticut to coaching in Kansas, to my second trip in Louisiana, to going to school in Nebraska, to going to school in Florida, junior colleges, Division II. I kind of been all over. And when you talk about this discussion, when we talk about race in the game and institutional racism and systemic racism in the game of baseball, I go back to the very first thing that I opened up with. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think Dr. Brooks talked about it. We can't shrug this off as if we don't want to deal with it or act as if it's not an issue. I think too many times, and it's moved from being, I'm not racist, I have Black friends. Like, we don't say that anymore because everybody knows that that doesn't equal to the idea that you not being racist, or I'm not racist because, I have Black players on my team. Again, that doesn't mean that you're racist, but it also doesn't mean that you're providing a solution to the problem. Opening up our minds, as Dana said, being able to, for me, acknowledge where your place is, and that the idea that you may not have given it thought, and the fact that you haven't given it thought, then also puts you in a position where you're part of what we need to change. We need to change that ideology. If you haven't thought about it, and you have Black players on your team, or if you haven't thought about it and you've been in those situations, for us as a minority, it's a constant thought. We don't have the choice but to think about it. And the irony is we're in a situation where, as the oppressed, it is now our job to educate those that are oppressing us. And that's a very, very big challenge. The one thing that I like about where we are, different than where we were with the Michael Brown situation and all those types of things, I believe more eyes have been opened. I believe more people that felt that, you know what, I'm not racist, or I don't subscribe to any of those theories. You're now starting to open up your minds and say, oh, wait a minute, I may not have said something that was blatantly racist, but man, I did clutch my purse when I was walking down the street, or I did walk to the other side of the street. And too many times, again, when you make that statement, oh, he's not Black, that's just Kerrick. No, Kerrick is Black. And who I am is that of a Black man, and I need to be seen as being that of a Black man. Trey Harris needs to be seen as being that of a Black man. And any other Black folks need to be recognized as who they are. And what we have to do is we have to put ourselves in a position where it's not that we don't see color, it's that we recognize the color that we see, and we treat them the same regardless of what their color is. And when we can get to that point, we'll put ourselves in a position in our society, in sport, in everything that we do, where then now we can talk about operating on an equal and level playing field. So again, we could have gone on forever. I felt like we were just getting started, and it could have gone on. I want to thank you guys as a panel for agreeing to be a part of this. I'm hoping that the people that were listening and reviewing this are able to take some things away. Feel free to email any of us, I'm sure, with questions that you may have after this, because we're open to that. It's a discussion that we have to have. Ask the questions, have the tough conversations with all white teams, mixed teams, whatever the case may be, your kids, whatever it is, have those conversations and make sure that everybody understands. I want to thank Craig Collitz and the ABCA. Thank JR, John Litchfield, Adam. Thank you guys for being on board. And most importantly, I want to thank our board of directors that we have with the diversity committee, and that's Spencer Allen, Tyrone Brooks, Kenny Pullman, Bonnie Hoffman, Steph Lewis, Mervell Melendez, Tony Regans, Jeremy Sheetinger. And on that subcommittee, you have Mark Martinez, Kimmy Massey, and Richard Canner. Running this thing is challenging, and I could not even begin to do it without those people that I just listed off to you, without having the ABCA be part of this, and having people on the panel that were agreeing to have this discussion. So for me, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you all. This is something that I'm very, very passionate about. And at the end of the day, I said it at the convention, we are in a people business that involves baseball and not a baseball business that involves people. If you remember that people come first, we won't ever have to have these discussions again. You will understand that we're treating people all the same, no matter who they are, where they come from, what their backgrounds are, what their history is. We're dealing with people, and people should all be treated the same way. Thanks. And JR, turn it over to you.
Kerrick, thank you so much. And on behalf of everyone here at the ABCA, all of our member coaches, gentlemen on the panel, thank you for bringing this to our membership. This is something that's long overdue. And I know throughout the night, we all hit on the fact that, there's opportunity right now. Dana, you mentioned it multiple times. You have people's ear, and thank you for taking the time to share your experiences with us. Ultimately, I'd like to thank our sponsor for allowing this to happen. Man, Pocket Radar has been absolutely awesome. They were 100% behind this episode in bringing this content out. So I need to stress to every single one of you, go buy a Pocket Radar, guys. I mean, it's one of the cheapest investments you can make for your pitching staffs, for your clubs. Go get a Pocket Radar. They're the ones who make something like this possible. We're a non-for-profit organization, so please support them. If you missed something tonight or you clicked into the conversation a little bit late, this episode will be available on demand within the Coaching Resource Library section of our website. It'll be about 24 hours before it's posted. And gentlemen on the panel, I'll send you all your own link to download. It'll be a top secret link, so don't share it with anybody. But yeah, so that way you'll be able to have the episode for whatever it is you'd like to use it for. On behalf of everyone here at the ABCA, thank you. Kerrick kind of stole my thunder because I normally go through our board of directors, our executive committee, Craig Collitz, John Litchfield, Juan Clark, Zach Hale, Matt West, Sarah Barlock, Ryan Brownlee, and Mike Odom. So we'll hit them twice. So thank you very much, and stay safe out there, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tonight's episode of ABCA At Home Perspectives is made possible by Pocket Radar. Pocket Radar's smart coach app system, with its unique ability to automatically capture videos with embedded velocities, allows coaches to stay connected and work remotely with current players and new recruits. Their Bring Your Training Home initiative will provide education and resources, including webinars and a limited time discount to help players remotely train, develop, and be seen at home with video analysis tools. Check out their 2020 Expo Theater presentation located in the ABCA Video Library.